Perfect. Okay. Then we're ready to start. And I went, hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Judy Newman, and I am the strategic advisor with Early Childhood Cares, was formerly the director. And I just love doing parent chats almost more than anything else in this whole program. So it's really, I'm really happy to see so many people that came out. And just to remind you, Early Childhood Cares is the early intervention and early childhood special education program for Lane County. And you can go to our website and get more information about us. I know most of you know something about us because you probably have a child in our program. So I want to just introduce our topic for today, and that is picky eaters, which is always a popular topic because we all have a lot to learn about this. And we have two of our wonderful staff here presenting. We have Brittany Willis here, and she is one of our occupational therapists. And we have Cathy Hyslop, who is one of our ECSE specialists and autism specialists in our program. So I'm going to turn the time over to them. I'm sure, I don't know how you want to handle it, but you'll tell the audience if you want to take questions as you go or wait till you're done. And Nellie and I can monitor the chat for you as well.
Perfect.
Definitely.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, it would be great if people keep their mute on. And if there's a question that isn't, something we say that isn't clear, please ask for clarification, because if you're not sure, somebody else might not be sure. We don't have time today to dive into really individual and brainstorm individual challenges. What we hope to bring to you is some hopefully novel global ideas that will support all of your children in some way and give you a place to start. And at the end, we'll make sure that you all know who to go to next for next steps. So with no further ado, let's get into it. So welcome all. Thank you, Judy, for that introduction. Thank you. We have a very big group, which I'm surprised about. I don't think we want to take the time today to let everybody introduce themselves because that would take half our time. But we do want you to have a chance to share a concern you have. So if you feel comfortable when we get to that part, be thinking now about, is there one thing you hope to learn from this? We'll let you share some thoughts there. I want to give you some perspective on mealtime and eating, and perhaps some alternative ways of thinking about your role and what that can look like. We've all heard a million times the family routine and sit at the table and all that, but we've got some more ideas that can help make mealtime perhaps more positive for you. Including ideas for new foods, and then sharing some thoughts about what food jag and food chaining is. Some of you may have thought or heard of that before too, or not be aware of it. We want you to know those things. And then lastly, leave you with at least one new thing that you are going to take away from this that you could try tonight. All right. So Judy did our introduction. There's Brittany and there's myself. We've both been at EC Cares for quite some time. And I know several of you here today. So hi, everyone that I know, and welcome all of you that I don't. So if anybody's comfortable, just shout out. What do you hope to take away? What's your biggest concern? What do you need support around?
Getting him to eat something other than what he wants.
Some new foods, expanding foods. Good. What else?
Not making mealtime so stressful with throwing food and food refusal.
Right, decrease stress, throwing, rejecting. Perfect.
We struggle with sensory issues around smell. So I can't even eat a meal in the same room as my son. So just tips for, like, I know it's not going to help overnight, but kind of help him explore new foods that the smell is really hard for him.
Good one. That's something we don't always think about, but you can all remember a time you walked into a room that had a really strong food smell and you might have gone, ooh, or whoa, yum. Smell is a big thing to many of our, many people. Anything else?
How to get more nutrients.
Increase nutrients. Great. All right. Well, that's a good list. Hopefully, and I think we do have some ideas to address all of those things and maybe more. So Brittany, I'm remembering right that I'm going first, right?
Yes, yes, if that works. And then I can add in and vice versa.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about just briefly some definitions. There's different types of eaters. There's good eaters that are interested in all kinds of new foods, likes different kinds of foods, adventurous in trying things. There's picky eaters, and many of us, at least as children, myself included, could be considered a picky eater. I didn't like a whole lot of things. I was dubious about food. So picky eaters may have those limitations, but they're eating enough. They're staying healthy enough. Many, many, many young children are considered picky eaters. There's also a category called resistive eaters. They have some pretty serious food aversions. They eat very few foods, and then we'll talk a little bit about what food jags are and the importance of recognizing that and helping to avoid your child go down that path. So some children can have such limited diets that they only eat orange foods or only eat foods that are soft or only eat foods that are crunchy. Some children may have medical issues now or in the past that can limit their access to foods and what they are able to eat. So keep those things in mind. And then let's talk about food in general. So we've often heard that, like, oh, just model eating. But if your child is adverse to the smell of foods and you're modeling eating Brussels sprouts, it's not going to go so well. We also, as grown-ups, have foods that we love and don't like. So thinking about pairing preferred food with a less preferred food, thinking about using our senses and encouraging, and this is where modeling can come in, encouraging your child to just really act on their food, play with their food. Any of those things are steps to eating. It may take many, many rehearsals before someone is willing to try a new food. And we're often pretty quick to change. Oh, I offered grapes at this meal and they didn't eat it, so tomorrow I'm going to offer bananas. Or at the next meal, I'm going to offer bananas. Sometimes it can really help to offer the same new food over and over so that it becomes familiar. Oh, wait, I know that smell. I know that look. It's been sitting there for a long time. So trying food doesn't always mean actually eating it. It means if you have aversion to smell, it means allowing it to be in the room, being in the room with that food. It means allowing it to be on your plate. I want to tell you a story about myself. Rewinding a little, when I used to do this chat in person, you guys are lucky because you're not going to have me presenting to you offerings of blood sausage or Limburg cheese or raw eggs or all kinds of foods that people often are adverse to and in fact don't want to have in the room. And I would offer snacks so that we could explore in ourselves what it feels like to be confronted with a food we don't want to eat. Because often that's where our children are coming from. We look at a peanut butter sandwich and say, what's not to love? Come on, eat it, it's good. But if I did that same thing to you as I'm handing you perhaps blood sausage or Limburg cheese or raw fish, you might You might love it. You might have learned to love it, but you might also be like, no way, there's no way you're going to get me to eat that. And that's the same with our children.
And I do have a story from Marcia Duncline. She's an occupational therapist and she works a lot in feeding. And she has a grasshopper story where she was actually, so I might, if that's okay with you, Cathy, read a little blurb of it, because I think it really kind of sets the stage for what may be something that is very familiar to us. It may be totally new and like a grasshopper to your child. So this is from her point of view. I was personally reminded of the exploration process recently. My family spent a month in Oaxaca, Mexico, living with a local family and studying Spanish at a language school. Just before we left, our host family proudly presented us with a going away meal. One of the central offerings was a new dish that we had not previously tried. I asked our host mother, "What is this new dish?" in my newly learned Spanish. She told me enthusiastically that it was champolinas, which I determined from a handy dandy Spanish-English dictionary to be grasshoppers. Now I am an adventuresome eater and do love to try new things, but grasshoppers? As I looked into the bowl, I could clearly see parts, grasshopper parts, identifiable parts, legs, bodies, heads, and antennae. And I realized that all of a sudden I had become a cautious eater. At least I was cautious about the bowl of parts in front of me. Interestingly, I noticed I explored this new food in ways quite similar to the approaches used by our cautious eaters. I watched as others ate them, and she spread a tortilla with a pile of guacamole and then liberally sprinkled the grasshopper parts all over it. She folded the tortilla and took a bite. She not only survived, but she smiled and clearly enjoyed it. I knew she had gone to the personal trouble and expense to provide us with this delicacy, and I needed to be polite and eat some, but I also knew I just was not capable of taking a mouthful. So I checked them out slowly. I studied them. I brought them close enough to smell it. They were fried and smelled like garlic. And then I put some and imitated what the host mother did and put some on a tortilla and put a little bit of guacamole in there and put just a tiny little pinch of a grasshopper and maybe two into the green mixture. I folded it up and I bit into it. It tasted like surprise guacamole, something familiar. I survived. Nothing was jumping around in my stomach. I repeated the sequence throughout the meal with more and more grasshoppers each time and gradually felt the texture, heard the crunch as I bit into it, tasted the garlic. I actually, with time, began to enjoy them. So that's just a little story. And I feel like I really like it because it goes into such detail about, how we kind of go about trying new foods and how some foods may be our child's grasshopper. And they're learning about so many different foods at this stage in their life and as young kids. So that is it.
Thank you, Brittany.
Uh-huh.
All right. So this was really eye-opening for me when I learned about this division of responsibility. Your job as parents are responsible for what is served, when it is served, and where it is served. You have control over that. So be thinking about those things and how it currently looks in your home and what, when, and where you might want to make changes. Your child's responsibility is how much and whether, because there are a few things we cannot make our children do. We cannot make them sleep. We cannot make them poop on the potty. We cannot make them talk, and we cannot make them eat. So when we turn it into that power struggle, and we'll talk a little bit about ways to avoid that, we will lose. I remember sitting at the table for hours because I wouldn't eat 3 peas. It wasn't because I didn't like peas. I didn't like the competition. I didn't like the pressure. I was very young. I love peas now. So think about that. The child's responsibility is how much and whether. So your job is to trust that your child is going to determine how much and whether to eat from what you provide. And you get to provide that structure. What is it? When do we serve it? And where do we serve it? So when we do our jobs with those things, children can do their jobs with eating. So here's another way to look at it. Your job, offer food consistently. Include a variety of food groups, not just what your child likes. And we've got a ton of examples of fun ways to present this. Your job is to decide, again, what, when, and where food is provided. Child's job, they get to eat the food in the order they choose. My first thought when I heard that years ago was like, no way, if I give him, my son's 30 now, but he used to be a picky eater like I was. If I give him his macaroni and cheese first, he's never gonna try the tuna fish that I put on the side that I'm wanting to mix in because I love that. But if you take away everything they like and just leave the less preferred, there's no motivation to come to the table at all. So they get to decide what order you present the variety. They decide how much of that variety, and they decide if they don't want to eat at all. And then you go back to the drawing board and think, okay, what else? What other combinations of food can I offer next time? What else do I have control of? When is next time going to be? So positive meal times can be really hard when our children are not very great eaters. And they are our little barometers. We bring to the table our feelings around mealtime. And if we're getting stressed out about it, because as you're saying, your kids aren't eating that much, they're sensitive to the smells, you're worried about increasing nutrition, it's fundamental as a parent to want to be able to feed and nourish your child, and they're not eating. What does that mean? So we get stressed. We start out coming from this stressful standpoint, and your children are barometers of that. They pick up on it. So try to tamp that stress down and think this next meal is gonna go great. And we've got some ideas to help you find that positive vibe. So think about what your goals are. Keep it simple, maybe. My goal is that we're going to only offer snacks for 15 minutes and not grazing throughout the day. Or that my child sits at the table for 5 minutes instead of only 3. That my child will allow a new food to be on the plate or a new smell to be in the room. My child won't freak out if I eat something in front of them that they don't like. My child will explore new foods, knowing and counting on and trusting that your children are going to grow up to be healthful eaters. And that you're just not going to have those power struggles anymore because you have roles. Your child has a role and you have a role. So eating with our kids is hard these days. We are scattered. We're often at home trying to work while our children are playing nearby. But the more we can create that atmosphere and that attitude that mealtimes are important, we do this together, it's not just something we randomly do while we're doing something else, can make all the difference. So thinking about, if you don't have a family mealtime, maybe your goal is that one meal or snack a day is together. Your example in eating, as these pictures really demonstrate in a lovely way, is very powerful. Let them see you trying new things. So eating at a table is another challenge for many of us. And some of us don't even have tables anymore. We have houses that have the bar top, the bar counter in the kitchen, or we eat in the living room or around sitting on the couch. The child's in the kitchen in his high chair eating while you're cooking the meal for the family. But what if you could shift that around to you get to decide what, when, and where, right? Not putting out a plate for them to eat their food while you're busy doing something else, but you purposefully preparing everybody's meal and sitting down at least once or twice a day together just to be making it a social event. And if you've never done that before, use a coffee table, sit on a blanket on the floor, try to get that TV or tablet turned off so that you're really pushing that idea that mealtime together is something we do. It is routine. If that's something you haven't done before and you try tomorrow, it's probably not going to stick. But if you try the next day and the next day and the next day, in other words, our young children learn through routine and repeated practice. So keep trying. Here's another aha that really made a difference in my world with my son and with in my work. We think, oh, my child's a picky eater, so I need to give them access to food all the time because I want them to have that opportunity. What I didn't realize is that when we do that, they're never registering a hunger in the way that we want them to. They just craze a little bit, so they never feel full, but they also never feel hungry. So when we are hungry, we are more motivated sometimes to eat something else that's maybe a little less preferred that's available. So if you are one of the many families that have the grazing bowl, just put out the goldfish while your child is playing, I would try to fade that because it's getting in the way of your child seeing A, that mealtime is a family social event, and B, that it is important, and C, that there are other foods that I could be eating if it was set up in the way that, in a structured way where you as the parent get to decide when, what, and where. So here's a little sample schedule. And for some of us, we may need to set little timers to say every 2 hours, I'm going to bring out an array of snacks and we're going to sit down and have a 15-minute snack together. It'll be available for 15 minutes and I'm going to put it away. Bring food back out at lunchtime and we'll do this again. That in itself can make a huge difference for many, many eaters. Just getting away from that, always nibbling on a little snack and not really getting full. This is a really hard one. I wish my parents had seen this. Don't force feed. You don't need, a clean plate's not required. Looking for signs that your child is hungry, like by keeping them distracted and not offering foods constantly and letting them run around for a couple hours and then like, oh, here's a great time to offer an array of foods. Forcing kids to eat makes them distrustful. We put that, if you don't eat, you don't get pressure. It's a power struggle and we can't make them eat. They become defensive and then meals become even scarier. We want to make it fun. So here's a really fun way to look at it. We talked about that family meal and sitting down at least face to face with, if it's just you and your child. Maybe the whole family is never around at the same time, but if you put on your plate the same things that they have on their plate, but in different proportions, then everybody's got an opportunity to see each other enjoying something and see each other eating the same things. So, and even in these examples, their plate is pretty robustly filled. That can be overwhelming to some kids. I would even have half of that on there. But if you see, it's the same ingredients, but presented differently, because some of our kids don't like it when our food touches. We don't want it all mixed up. But we like the pasta, we like I can't tell what's in the one thing, looks like little chunks of meat or something. So the point is, you prepare a meal for you and your child, and you serve everybody different portion sizes of all of the items. Maybe your child has the bigger bowl of mac and cheese, but they also have one of your bites of chicken and one of the strawberries, and you have a big old thing of chicken and a pile of strawberries and a little bite of mac and cheese. Is that making sense to everyone?
And I think the key is to underwhelm. versus overwhelm. So if it's a food that may be new or that they're learning about, just having, just the smallest little, portion on their plate. It might just be one small bite size. And then also this is nice because you're not, there's not a lot of food waste too, which, I know can be troublesome. So underwhelming with just one piece. So you're still offering it, but it's not something that they won't come to the table because of.
Thank you. That's a good point, Brittany. So here's that, having that preferred foods, rotating those around. If your child really loves mac and cheese, you're not going to have that at every meal. They love mac and cheese and, chicken nuggets and SpaghettiOs. Rotate those things at different meals, but always have something that they like. And then encourage them to mess with the other things. Touch it. If you don't want it, you can take it off and put it on the learning plate. Let's smell that new food. Let's give it a kiss and put it away. But the point is, again, they get to have a preferred food, but they also get exposure to newer foods that you are also enjoying eating. This is going to take some time. These are some huge shifts for some of us. And so if you try it tomorrow and say, oh, it didn't work, you've got to keep trying it the next day and the next day and the next day. So our children need that repeated practice and need over time to see, here's the new way we're doing this, the new routine. So have those small goals. You share with other family members what you're doing and why, reminding older siblings not to give them the snacks if you're trying to create a little bit of hunger. And then changing our own perspective. When you start thinking, it's so frustrating, it's so difficult, thinking, wow, my child is having a difficult time. Because they are. It's not easy, all the things we're asking them to do. So some food exploration. Eating food doesn't necessarily, when you're learning about a food, you're not necessarily going to eat it right away, just like the grasshopper story. So play with it, touch it, reinforce that. Great job picking up your food. Even if they don't eat it, we're going to say, great job picking it up, not, oh, why aren't you eating it? Thinking about foods that they prefer and like, and thinking about another food that's similar to that can help expand. Maybe they like mac and cheese. I keep coming to because it's so popular. And so, but there's different flavors of it. There's white mac and cheese and yellow mac and cheese. So changing it up a little bit. So we're not just stuck with the same thing every time. Adding a little bit of bitter or sweet. So many times as an autism consultant, there's a lot of picky eaters in my world. And I have found that sometimes we err on the side of making it too bland. We think, oh, they're a picky eater, so I have to make it really bland. And I have seen kids finally come to life with food when they accidentally got lemon on it. Or I had a child start eating kimchi was one of the first things they ate. If you've eaten kimchi, that is strong. So we were erring the wrong direction. So don't be afraid to experiment with put some salsa on there. Do some things to jazz it up and then talk about what that feels like or looks like or smells like or hopefully tastes like.
And I want to mention too, so this is a good picture of what the learning plate, this says no thank you plate. I like the learning plate because it insinuates it's coming back. It's not going to go away completely, but it can be a separate bowl or plate. If you keep it consistent, that can kind of help with the routine. But if a child really doesn't want it on their plate, instead of them moving away from the table, they can move the plate. So it gives them control. And so they can move the plate away and they can put that food that they're learning about on it. And then as they get more comfortable with the food, you can kind of bring it back. I've also played games like putting a napkin over the plate if they just really don't want it in their line of vision. And then you can kind of just do brief, little peekaboo. Oh, our broccoli is saying peekaboo. And that can be a kind of a way just to draw attention to it just for a few seconds, and then it goes away.
And that could be a strategy, particularly for a family who has the sensory issues with the smells. We don't want to overwhelm with smells or force it. Like, we all know what it feels like to be in a place that has smells that we don't like. We want to get out of there. So could that, I've just used a piece of broccoli as an example, because it does have a pretty pronounced smell. Could the piece of broccoli sit on the counter? Can it then move over to the backside of the table and work its way forward so that it becomes more understood? And maybe trying that one new food and offering that one new smell over several meals until it becomes that your child becomes more acclimated to that. We get used to things if we experience it over time.
I think this is where I was gonna start.
I thought so too. I was pausing to say that. I love this. This is it's a fun slide. Go, Brittany.
This is, I love this image because it shows how fruits and vegetables, which I know that many parents struggle with getting their kids to eat, they can change so much depending on the season. I mean, you can get a sweet one and then a sour one in the same package. Some are really juicy, some aren't as juicy. And that's really true for fruits and vegetables. They can taste wildly different depending on when you're buying it. But on the other hand, crackers and other processed foods, they come the same way every time. So just thinking about our more cautious eaters, it's so nice to have that predictability, and that's very comforting for them. And the same goes for fast food versus cooking meals at home. I know for me, sometimes my chicken noodle soup changes just a little bit. Maybe I add a different ingredient, but if you go to McDonald's, your hamburger is going to come the same way every time. And so I think that's really important to think about is, why kids like grains and maybe lean more towards liking the grains and starches versus like the fruits and vegetables or the protein food group categories, because they do know what kids like and what people like, and they're made for that exact purpose. So you can say extremely picky, or this is putting a positive spin on it. Very selective, has strong preferences. They're still figuring out what they like. I really like the language of just saying, oh, yep, Billy he's not eating peas yet. I feel like it's a very small difference, but it insinuates that maybe in the future, Billy will try that food and may like that food. So this is a journey, and it can take a really long time to see progress. I've read some research that says it takes 25 times, and sometimes it takes 50, sometimes it takes 80. And I think it's really important to say that, because these changes, they can be really small and they can take a long time, but we're all about just trying to expand the range of foods that your child can eat. And so I have some different ideas. Let's see, you can go ahead. And so we're going to focus on exposure or food rehearsals, which is, I like the wording of food rehearsals because it insinuates that they might not try it, but they're learning about it and it's going to come back. So building tolerance to food being near their plate, like on the learning plate, and maybe eventually coming on their plate. I would try to put it on their plate in maybe that very small portion, but if that's just a no-go, starting with the learning plate is a great first start. So also time for those that, I know someone said mealtimes can be so stressful, and I agree. There are certain times like you're just trying to get food to the table. Sometimes it lasts like 5 minutes, sometimes it's 3 minutes, and then it's like over. And so picking times where you're not feeling it's rushed. We do want to have mealtime peace if that's possible. And so if if you working on these food rehearsals at mealtimes is just too much, you can always take it to a different part of the day where maybe it's more relaxed. Maybe dinner time just really isn't the time to practice exploring or doing food play. So maybe taking it at a, going outside and having a picnic and bringing out the broccoli then, or, if it can be other foods like grapes or something. So thinking about timing as well. Give credit for helping, smelling, licking, touching. I feel like a lot of families that I've worked with, they've had a lot of success with having kids involved in mealtime preparation, because when you get to the dinner table, even if there's not that pressure, that's the verbal pressure of eating foods, they know that that's the time that they do eat. So taking that away and having just mealtime preparation, sometimes kids will be more willing to just try in different ways. And that can be with tools in the kitchen too, like salad spinners or egg slicers, bringing different kitchen tools in. Talking about foods. So when you're eating, it's all about that modeling and talking about, oh, my piece kind of sweet. Oh, it's squishy. I'm gonna poke it with my finger, squish, or my blueberry's really squishy. Or watch how it rolls. It rolls a little bit across the table. Or you can, also talking about the taste. So you're giving them a lot of information about the food without them even trying it, which can just build familiarity with the food. So helping a picky eater warm up to a new food. So this shows catering is serving the food exactly the same way the child wants, and being considerate. So serving the preferred food and also having an exposure of a new food also at the mealtime. And you might start with something as small as a grain of rice and increase the size of the food that's offered. So I'm trying to give you lots of different ideas in which you can kind of focus, and maybe you just offer that really small grain size piece of the vegetable, or maybe it's a piece of the chicken. And then as they get more familiar with it, you increase the size. So this is just showing offering the one food that they really like, the banana. And the new way is building a plate. So we oftentimes will recommend having at least 2 preferred foods at mealtimes and snacks. And I do want to mention, we even say, trying to offer having meals and snacks looking pretty similar. So trying to offer like a protein, a grain, and a fruit and vegetable. We actually combine those. So fruits and veggies are actually one food group. If you're able to do that, and if they have enough foods that they're eating in those food groups. So offering 2 preferred foods and maybe 1 non-preferred food in that like little grain size piece. And if they really don't want it on their plate, they can move it to their learning plate. Does that make sense? Hopefully. If you have questions, just let me know. So serving only what they ask for, the chips or the crackers, they don't have exposure to new foods. And so their diet stays the same, and that can be really frustrating and confusing. With exposing them to one new food at the meals and snacks, they're gathering information about that food. And if you're able to eat with them that food, you can kind of describe it to them, and they're getting even more information about it. And you can show them different ways that you can explore it by, looking at it, touching it, smelling it, and if your child gets uncomfortable with that, then, kind of backing up a step, but, just really encouraging different ways to play and explore foods. I really like this picture. So this is the mac and cheese that it shows, served in the same way. And then the following picture shows just making really small changes. So, oftentimes maybe that change is just changing the brand of mac and cheese, because some kids are like little detectives and they know that it's not their craft brand that they like. So making that switch can be a big deal. I've seen with the mac and cheeses, they're offering a lot of different types of noodles. They have really fun ones like tractors and cows. You could even use, they have the shells instead of the elbows. So trying to make just really, really small changes to the foods that they're eating to where it's kind of the just right challenge where they'll still accept it. And that might take, a little detective work on your part to try to figure that out. But you're just trying to make, even though it's still mac and cheese, to kids, it could seem like a totally new food, especially if it's with the different noodles. And so instead of trying the raspberries every day, maybe you try the blackberries instead. That might be too big of a change. So you might have to back it up a little bit. Maybe it's raspberries in a different way, say dried raspberries, freeze-dried raspberries instead of the fresh raspberries. So, trying to make these really kind of small changes to where they still will accept the food. And I will say that for making changes, two of the easiest way to make a change is changing the shape and changing the color. Oftentimes, the harder changes to make are taste, so changing the way the food tastes, or texture. So eating fruits only one way, say you're giving them whole apples and that's how they eat their apples, maybe we try having it first, and then we move to thicker wedges, maybe slices, thin wedges. And while it's still an apple, we're just trying to present it in different ways so it doesn't always look like that same food. We're trying to build what we call a food stretch. So we want that a little bit of flexibility with their preferred foods. And so variety with their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, maybe they like it specifically cut in half with the crust cut off. Maybe we try it in triangles instead, or even maybe we try it with a cookie cutter. Some kids really like watching that process. Others, that makes them very upset. So you kind of have to, your child best, but whether to offer it cut up in a different way, or maybe have them part of that process and having them push that cookie cutter in and having that star peanut butter sandwich. These rolls are really fun too. That might be too big of a change, but they are very, very fun. You can roll out the bread and then put on the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So, and roll them up. So peanut butter, some kids love peanut butter, and I would say even changing up the brand. That's the first thing I kind of go towards is, maybe changing up from Jif to the Skippy peanut butter. And, if that's an okay change, then maybe we go with a little bit of almond butter mixed in, making sure it's the smooth kind, because texture is a little bit more challenging. But, trying Nutella, peanut butter with jam, sun butter, and I would try maybe just putting like a tiny, maybe a half teaspoon, maybe a quarter teaspoon mixed in with the peanut butter to start, to see so it doesn't change the flavor dramatically. So identify liked foods, color, texture, taste. Start with similar items that they like. I had one parent, and she was just so savvy. She knew that her child loved dry, crunchy, beige items, and so she would deep fry the vegetables and he would eat them because they were beige and they were crunchy. And that's how she got him to start eating vegetables, because it looked similar to the chips and the crackers that he already ate. Other items that, if your child really does like the veggie straws, maybe trying the snap pea crisps, while there's not like a whole lot of it's still it's a vegetable, and you can kind of make that stretch to maybe eventually having a pea on there, but or mixing it in with the veggie straws to start. So trying to just offer and then make those stretches. If they're liking, chips, maybe throwing in a couple of the beige veggie chips in there as well. And then maybe you put in the orange ones later on, or the green ones. So you're just really making those small changes, but it's working towards that flexibility piece. And this one is about easing into dips and sauces. If your child loves plain noodles, you can have the sauce in another. I like to use the muffin. They have a nice little silicone muffin dishes that can keep it completely separate if they do not want them to touch. And that can also be on the learning plate. You can work up to dipping the noodle in there, and maybe that noodle, maybe it stays on the learning plate, maybe it comes over to the child's plate. Maybe you're dipping and wiping it off, and they're trying it that way. So maybe it just has a little bit of that taste. And then working up to teeny tiny dips and taking bites, maybe half sauce, half plain, and eventually maybe increasing sauce and leaving, some plain. So it kind of gives you just ways to kind of work gradually into trying and exploring. And this is just another, kind of, I always like to do the swimming game. They like to go for a swim, the noodles. And so they're going to go ready, set, jump, and they jump in. And of course, the noodle might stay in that little cup. I do love these little muffin cups for sauces and other foods, so they don't touch if they're wet foods. But dipping games are so fun. You could also do like a game of just painting, if that's just for additional exposure and food play. These are all great ways to kind of explore. I really like if your child is hesitant about certain foods, sometimes it can be a great strategy to pair it with a puree or a dip that they like. For example, like peanut butter. If they love peanut butter, maybe trying dipping a carrot into the peanut butter and having them lick it off. That way they're bringing the carrot to their mouth. They might not take a bite of the carrot, but they're still getting smell and a little bit of taste. Mixing that sour and bitter with sweet and salty, and stronger flavors. Sometimes our kids surprise us and they like those really spicy flavors or really sour flavors. And so, kind of giving it a shot, trying it out and seeing what their preferences are. Broccoli with grated cheese. I really love Parmesan cheese because you can say, oh, we're going to make it snow on your food. Look at it. Oh, or maybe it's just snowing on the learning plate. Sprinkles can be really fun, like on yogurts and things. Oh, we're going to make a rainbow on our food, and they can be in control of that. Some kids really, you get a lot of buy-in with them just taking a little bit and sprinkling it and adding some, a little bit of color to their food too. Chocolate chips, you might want to try different spices that like cinnamon, that you might not necessarily think that they will like, but some kids really seek a lot of different flavors, or they like that spiciness. So this just kind of shows that it can take a while. Maybe initially the broccoli is on the learning plate and it's completely ignored. Maybe you play that game of peekaboo with it, and eventually maybe it moves over to the child's plate, and you pretend that there are trees, or you can also have them dip maybe in a ranch and you kind of paint with them. Eventually, maybe your child likes to kind of feel the tops of them. They have kind of a fun bumpy texture. Smelling them, maybe licking them. I think it's always important to kind of talk about like, oh, if you don't like it, you can spit it out. That gives kids a lot of control. And that might be something that you practice. You could practice putting it into a napkin so it's not necessarily on their plate. But that can give kids a lot of control, especially if it's like, oh no, this food's in my mouth and I really don't want it. To have that control, to be able to spit it out, can be really empowering. And then eventually maybe it gets eaten. So expecting them to taste it right away, it is a journey, it's a process, and you likely to be disappointed and to give up. But if you give them, if you keep on trying and incorporating it into your meals and what's offered, you might see some success and some gains eventually. And so this, I was talking a little bit, and the food chaining, food chaining is a great way to work on just food flexibility for kids that are food jagging. And what a food jag is when a child is only eating the same thing prepared in the same way every day. And these kids usually have a pretty restricted diet. They may have dropped a food group, maybe 2 food groups. And the issue with the food jagging is they will often drop foods that they might be eating 3 foods and they're only eating those 3 foods, and then they burn out, and then it further restricts their diet. So what do we do with these kids? And we kind of talked about it a little bit, is trying to make these really, really small changes to the foods that they are eating. If your child is only eating 3 foods, I oftentimes will go with trying to offer a new food, just to, along with trying to make small changes, but really focusing in on, let's try adding a new food just by having it on their plate and getting a little bit more flexibility with looking at it, seeing it, touching it, maybe eventually smelling it. And we can talk a little bit more about that. So this one goes into a little bit more about texture. Maybe they're only accepting fruit as a puree, and maybe it's in a pouch. And I was thinking about this slide, and oftentimes I will start out with changing the presentation by offering, say it's a fruit puree in a pouch. I will oftentimes try offering it in a bowl. So you're not changing the food, but you're changing the presentation. And sometimes that's where you start, offering it on a different plate, offering it on a different bowl, in a different bowl. So oftentimes I'll start here with offering the pouch in a bowl and seeing how that goes. Or also you can kind of change up, like the baby food banana, adding in mashed banana, to where there's, trying to eliminate, it's going to be a little bit of a texture change, but you can also do that. Adding in small bits of banana can add a little bit of texture. Also, if you want to add, if they are interested, is you could also do bits of Ritz cracker or something that's a little bit more meltable to change it up, and you can really make it refined. So changing texture in that way, and then maybe going to the larger bits of banana and then serving banana slices. So this kind of shows you how you can make those kind of small changes. And here it goes for the yogurt lover, having the yogurt, and then trying it with mixed in with a little bit of jam, trying the yogurt with the fruit chunks, maybe with real fruit, and then fruit with a little bit of yogurt on the side, and then actual fruit. And this can take time, but it kind of shows you how you can make those, how you can make those changes. And then chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets is such a popular one. It's a popular one at my house right now. So I would start with different brands, changing the shape. Like if they're eating only chicken nuggets from, say, McDonald's, maybe trying the home baked chicken nuggets that look the same. Maybe offering the dino nuggets, so changing the shape of the chicken nugget. Offering a dip on the side can also be a way to make a small change. Trying a different brand, like I mentioned, and then, cutting it into different shapes. Eventually, maybe you try the chicken strips or popcorn chicken, or chicken patty. And then, I think the changing the plate too, sometimes you don't think of it, but I think some kids, they think of how the food is presented, but the packaging is part of the food. So changing up the plate can even be a change. And then French fries. So this kind of gives you a different ways to offer. And I think with French fries, trying different brands, changing the shape of the French fries can also be a great way to do that. Offering tater tots and maybe eventually going to hash browns, roasted potato wedges, baked potato toppings, and then maybe eventually potato salad. And then no pressure playing with food. Where do we start? Playing with vegetables. And I kind of mentioned some different ways to do it. It could honestly, it could be a game of peekaboo underneath the napkin, or it could be touching it, pretending that they're trees. And I'll give you some other ideas with other vegetables. Books can be a great way outside of meal times to talk about food. A lot of times I don't know if you're taking kids to the grocery store just with COVID, but that can also be a great experience, having them pick out, an apple to put in the bag, or, picking out a vegetable that they want to check out. And that's kind of taking it away from the meal time. Playing with real vegetables, so putting real vegetables in their play kitchen. Playing with toy vegetables can also be a great way. And then kids serving themselves or helping them serve others. I feel like mealtime jobs can really be helpful. Having them help you put everybody's plate together, or if you're trying to work on having them sit at meal times, maybe they're drawing placemats for everybody, or they're giving people napkins. So or bringing the chairs to the table as a way to kind of get them there. Focus on progress. If they can touch it first, eating will follow. And so we gather so much information about food through our senses. We use every one of our senses when we're eating, and it's not just about taking bites and chewing. We're looking at food, we're touching it, we're smelling it, and with repeated exposure, it increases comfort, and it makes each little step that much easier once they become more familiar with it. And this is just a way, one example of ways to play with cucumbers. So maybe you cut them and roll them, and so they're wheels. You can pretend you can roll them up your arm, and maybe it's like a car and it goes beep beep on the cheek and goes away. Silly faces, you put them on your eyes. getting closer to the mouth. Chop up mini cucumbers and stack them up in a tower and make them, maybe your child likes to make things crash instead of stacking, and so they can be the ones to make it go kaboom. Cucumber boats. And you can have them pretend to have them on water, or maybe it's just having the paintbrushes. So, you know, that maybe they are dipping them and they're creating a little picture on their placemat.
Brittany and Cathy, I just wanted to let you know it's about 5:06. So
Okay.
We have 2 slides.
Great, perfect.
This one kind of wraps it up, and like thinking about those steps and what, you know, remembering what you have control over, but you decide what, where, and when, and child decides how much and if, and then moving up that hierarchy. If you're not having family meals at all yet, serving 1 meal and including 1 or 2 preferred foods at that meal, reminding ourselves to take that pressure away, thinking about foods from a sensory perspective. What can I add to help my child gain that, even if it's from across the room? Make mealtime fun, and moving all the way up to eating new foods. It is a process. It is a journey. I hope you all have fun with it. Oh yeah, maybe you want to take one moment to talk about gagging, because that's different from choking.
Yes. So knowing the difference between choking and gagging. Choking is when the airway is blocked, there's changing of color of the face. Gagging can be, it's actually a protective response, but it can also be related to sensory. And so, you know, coughing and gagging are protective. And so I think it's really important to know that, remaining calm, reassuring your child, taking a break if your child is, you know, gagging. But also I think it's important to leave the mealtime on a positive note, because it can become a learned behavior. So, you know, remaining calm, and maybe they help with, I didn't mention this before, but cleaning up can be a great way that, okay, you know, we're gonna go ahead and maybe they take 1 bite of their applesauce, which they really like, and then we're gonna go clean up. So you might have to back up a step, but I think if you have any concerns about choking, then definitely look into CPR classes, but choking and gagging are different.
So I hope all of you know who your child service coordinator is. They are often a abundance of knowledge about these topics, and if they get stuck, they have our regional team supports, OTs like Brittany, that they can go to get more individualized support. So if you feel like you've gotten some ideas today, but you need more help, ask your child service coordinator. Remember that expanding eating is an adventurous, lifelong journey for us all. So do your best to make it fun. I hope you all have come away with at least 1 new idea that you can try in this next week. And keep going, keep trying, make it routine, make it fun. Thank you all for being here.
Well, I just want to thank the 2 of you for such a great presentation. Every time I hear this, which is many times, I always learn a lot. So really, really appreciate it. And I'll just ask you, I don't know if there's, I know where I'm going to, I think I'm going to close this down. We're already a little over time, but if anyone has a pressing question for you, do you mind hanging out for 5 minutes? And
that's fine.
Okay, then I'm going to just officially say we should stop the recording probably, and wish everyone a good evening. And thank you. I'm going to leave because I have another meeting.